the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Moshe Machanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back. On today's episode, Moshe and I'll be speaking with Ben Yoskovitz. Ben is an investor, an entrepreneur, and the co-author of the book Lean Analytics. We're looking forward to hearing how Lean Analytics can improve product teams and grow the product itself. So let's hop in. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing great. Hey, Moshe.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Ben. Welcome to the show. Fellow Torontonian, I must say. For everyone that might not know where Ben is from. So he's also from Toronto. With Lean Analytics, that book that you wrote and this background, I'm sure also, Matt, you're excited about that.
Yeah, very excited. Yeah, I read the book a number of years ago, and that's my background is analytics. And so I'm really excited to have you on. Yeah, so I'm really excited to have you on the show. Very, very cool.
Wherever the word analytics comes in, like I know Matt is like, oh,
yeah, I perk up. And I just happen to be in product too. So product and analytics is like, yeah, that's my bread and butter. So this is awesome.
Softball questions only from Matt, please.
This is cool.
Before we get to that, let's tell us a bit about yourself first, Ben, who you are and how did you get into product management, etc.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've been in the tech space for a long time. I started my first company in 1996. Went to McGill, was doing a psych degree, so it had nothing to do with anything that I ended up doing, really. But, that was the early days of the web. Met a couple of guys. They were looking at starting a web dev shop, let's say, a services business, building websites, e-commerce sites. I mean, very early days. I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me see. And I'd always been interested in technology. So I just sort of fell into entrepreneurship and not dissimilarly sort of fell into product. Love building stuff, love being involved in the process. And then, so, you fast forward through all the years, right before Lean Analytics, which, now is about 10 years old, which is pretty incredible. It started an accelerator program called Year One Labs with three other guys in Montreal. This is right around the time Lean Startup was coming out. And I'd made previous mistakes, started companies, fallen on my rear end, all kinds of ridiculous stuff. And started this incubator or accelerator program. We invested in 5 startups. One of those companies was acquired by Airbnb, which was a pretty cool experience. But we started applying lean methodology. And from that experience, now it was pretty theoretical at the time. And so we were trying to apply the methodology quite rigorously. And that's what got myself and Alistair Croll into writing the book. By that point, I had built a couple of startups, failed a couple of times. And then after that, got more focused on running product at a company called Go Instant, which was acquired by Salesforce, and then ran product at another company called Veracel. So it's sort of a long, winding road. Started angel investing as well, doing a mix of things, but I've always loved building software companies.
Yeah, that's nice. And that's what you also do today at Highline Beta, right?
Yeah, so I started Highline Beta 7 years ago with a co-founder, Marcus Daniels. Bit of a different business now. So we are both a innovation services business working with big companies to help them. I like to say build businesses or ventures outside of their core. And then we run a venture studio and venture capital fund. So actually, Highline Beta is a combination of all the things I enjoy doing. So I decided, okay, you know what? It's time to start another company. It had been a while. I said, well, what if we could combine all the things we like doing, investing in very, very early stage companies, love investing in founders, but didn't want to be just a VC, where that was sort of the main focus of the job. The venture studio gives us the opportunity to work with those founders. I'm going to say 6 to 9 months, very, very hands-on, helping them build product, go to market, recruit, raise capital. So everything you would imagine you would need to do at the earliest stages. So it gives us the opportunity to do that. And then the innovation services business gives us the opportunity to explore a ton of different industries and verticals, different problems, with large companies that are also trying to often, these are large companies that aren't necessarily software technology companies, but oftentimes they're trying to figure out the application of software technology, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and it's always good when you do the stuff that you love, because then you don't feel it's work, right?
Well, it's still work. Let's not pretend. I don't know. I don't know how you guys feel, but I think that's fair. That's good in a tweet or on a T-shirt. But no, it's still real work. But the goal of combining everything that we enjoy doing into a different model. Venture studios are now quite popular. There more and more of them are popping up. There's lots of flavors of them. But we were pretty early days in the model, still trying to figure it out, combining these different pieces together. But it is fun. It is interesting. And so I do enjoy it. But, building startups from zero is no joke.
Yeah, absolutely. So, our focus here of the Product for Product is about products that help product managers. And what we wanted to talk with you is about the book, Lean Analytics. And we started, covering books recently, actually. And book is another tool, to help product managers to learn about the trade. And I'm sure there are some tools also inside the book that can help product managers. But first of all, tell us, how did you get to write this book specifically about analytics, right?
Yeah. So again, we were applying this lean startup methodology right when Eric Ries's book came out, The Lean Startup. And I remember reading that. And then I remember reading 4 Steps to the Epiphany from Stephen Blank. And if you've ever read that book, which is mostly B2B focused around customer discovery and customer development, I read that and I had just failed a B2B startup. And I read it, I was like, oh, I made that mistake. Oh, I made that mistake. You literally felt like the book had been written for me, which of course it had not been. So, we're applying this lean startup methodology, and all of us at Year One Labs are nodding our, oh yeah, you gotta interview people, you gotta validate, you gotta, build an MVP. It all makes sense as Eric is writing it, but applying it turns out to be not that easy, which is no surprise, right? All frameworks look wonderful on a sheet of paper, and then you try to apply them, and you're like, oh, this is not so easy. So it was trying to take some of that more theoretical principles of lean startup and apply rigor through analytics. My co-author in the book, Alistair, had previously written a web analytics book for O'Reilly. So O'Reilly was starting to publish this lean series. Ash Maurya's book, Running Lean, if you've ever read that, which is really good. So they were looking for something that was more data-driven. We were applying those very principles and coming up with ideas of how to apply lean more rigorously. So that's how the book sort of came to be. Taking lean, and if you read Lean Analytics, we start by talking about build, measure, learn, and some of the basic principles, but then try to get into the weeds.
So tell us go a bit more details about how does the book does that?
Sure. So there's a couple of things we tried to do in the book. One of them, which doesn't stand the test of time that well, is benchmarking. So again, we published the book in 2013. So it is, in fact, it's just 10 years. I think we published it in March, if I'm not mistaken. So it's 10 years old. Benchmarking is important. My churn versus your churn versus someone else's churn, as an example. And then, of course, you realize different types of businesses and all of that. But benchmarking, we tried. It's tough to do because these things get sort of outdated. Lots has changed in 10 years. And a book, once you printed it, of course, you can write more versions of it, but not the best form factor for that. But some of the frameworks that we implemented in the book or talked about in the book, I would say trying to identify the metrics that matter to you. That, I think, I go back and I look at it and I think about it and I talk to people. I'm like, no, that still actually applies. Trying to figure out what to track and what to focus on by understanding what business you're in, the sort of business model that you're operating, and the stage that you're at. I think that concept, or those concepts put together, still apply and still super valuable for product people to figure out how to solve problems.
Yeah, that you nailed it. That's what I'm thinking as well. because I did read it and I still use that today, like metrics that matter, not using vanity metrics. So I know that was in there too, like leading indicators versus lagging indicators. So those kind of principles, they're still relevant today, and people are still trying to adapt to them and bring them into the product space. Even though it's 10 years on, I still see people trying to adopt that stuff.
100%. I think actually, even if you go right back to the basics and try to figure out what even makes a good metric. If I'm staring at a number, how do I know that number is a good number to be looking at? Even that, when I still talk to founders today, look, everybody makes the mistakes until you learn from them. You can read about it. Oh yeah, but applying it is a different story. So even that, what makes a good metric? It should be a ratio or a rate, as opposed to just a fixed number, right? Not the number of users, the number of users over time. Okay, we're getting a little. Even those basics, I think, are still important. Of course, they're still important today because, so people are still, new people getting into product management, new people starting companies have to sort of learn those things. The one metric that matters as a concept of, 10 years ago, tracking things wasn't even that easy, right? Just think of all the data, how easy it is now to track stuff.
Yes.
So that's what people do. They just track more stuff. And that makes the problem even worse, which is, now I have even more data than I had before. What do I focus on? That, to me, I think is still the fundamental question for product people.
Yeah, but it also can become very confusing when you have so much things that you can track these days.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like a forest. And what do I look for?
Analysis paralysis, right?
It's worse now, I think, honestly, than it was back then, because now you can track so many things, and it's so much easier to track things. And it's even easier to query the data. I mean, these sound like simple things, but again, you have to sort of, maybe people listening to the podcast, some I'm sure were working 10 years ago, but there's lots of newer product managers that weren't working 10 years ago. So they don't know what things look like.
Absolutely.
And so it has gotten, in a way, amazingly enough, it's gotten harder to figure out what to track. There are some things, I think the advantages we have today is a lot more people share data. And so benchmarking, again, back to sort of benchmarking from 10 years ago, some of the principles actually are still relatively the same, but more companies, for example, publish their data. We're tracking this, we're tracking that, we hit this benchmark and we were able to scale off of that. So I think there's more content and information out there, which is a good thing, but also challenging because you have to parse through that and figure out what matters to you in your specific case with whatever product that you're building.
Yes. We actually talked in one of the episodes with the startup founder in Israel that the company is called Loop.
Yeah, right. Loops.
And they actually have, they go beyond the data to give you insights and also actions, what you should do based on the data. But they also have, they kind of go around the internet and do this curation of this type of information that people will publish in similar situation, and then they try to direct you to that based on your situation. Right. So it's a really interesting one to look at. It's called Loops. And the other thing I'm thinking about is this is actually one of those things that I'm trying to do right now with work to put together at Ben Public, to put together a bit more of KPIs and metrics for our clients to choose from, so they understand all of those. And then benchmarking is one of those things they're always like, okay, so what do I have to do? What's the number I should get to, right? And
yes.
And it's a very tough answer to a question to answer, because it's like, first of all, it's really depends where you are in your stages. Second, it's all relative to, everyone is very different. Third, even if there is a benchmark out there, it might be outdated, or it might be very specific for that client. So what you said really resonates with me about, benchmarks and specifically.
Yeah, and I think I think benchmarks can be helpful. You can't rely on them exclusively. And you have to realize also that this is not a situation where you hit a number and you automatically move to the next step, and then hit another number and automatically move to the next step. Of course, everything is a little bit more complicated than that. And
Yeah.
so, even in the book, we talk about the idea of you can't just eliminate your own gut instincts or the circumstances that you're dealing with, and only look at data. That's not going to get you to where you need to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I also sometimes tell people is that KPIs or matrices are a lot about the direction that they show. So it's
Right.
not an infinite number like at this given time, but it's more like over time. Like, do I show growth?
Right.
Do I show a decline? Whatever it is that I'm trying to get to, am I moving the needle somehow?
Yeah, of course. I think the over time, sort of where do metrics move, and then also focusing on different metrics over time. So I think this is again also the challenge, and it happens in small startups. It happens in big companies as well, where they try to focus on too many parts of the business or the product at the same time. And so, we described analytics in the book like squeeze toys, which is, you focus in one area and it bubbles up another area, as opposed to just trying to do everything at once. And I think that's an important thing for people to think about is what questions are we trying to answer? What problems are we trying to solve? And so if we can really focus there and prioritize, then we can figure out what data to track for a period of time. So again, it doesn't mean we stop tracking that data later on. It's just what are we doubling down on today?
If you would want to give a product manager like the most important thing to learn from the book, what would that be?
For me, recently because I've been going back and looking at some of the stuff in the book, rewriting sort of in a way, I launched a newsletter recently and writing updates and rethinking some of those things. To me, I think the piece that product folks miss is recognizing that the product is part of a system, that the whole business is in fact a system, both a mechanical and a biological one. This maybe gets a little theoretical, but this, product people have this tendency to get really hyper-focused. Okay, my job is to increase conversion on this landing page to something else. My job is to lower churn by 2%. And of course, that's probably your job, and you should focus on figuring that out. But if you don't understand the implications of that downstream, or you don't understand what feeds into that, i.e., you don't take a step back and understand the whole system, you actually start to make bad or less good decisions because you don't understand how the whole business operates. So you sort of put blinders on because you're told to focus, and you should. But I think the most important thing in the book, but I think about product management in general, is this combination of a 20,000-foot view, which is a little bit more strategic. I'm looking up and I'm trying to and the 2-foot view, which is executing. If all you do is the 20,000-foot view, you're not a product person, I don't think. But if all you do is the 2-foot view, you're just executing tasks. Yeah. And that's also really dangerous. So in the book, we talk a lot about focus on a metric that matters today, run experiments against that, very tactical. But we also talk about understand the business you're in and how the whole system operates. So when you pull a lever on the left side, what's the implication on the right side? When you push a button on the right side, what happens on the left side? And I think that is really important for product people to understand.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's also hard for some of us because it's almost two different mindsets. And sometimes it's, just the way that some of us were maybe conditioned to do our job. So.
I agree. I agree with that. I think most product people are trained and frankly asked to focus on solving a very specific thing. One of the exercises in the book that we tried to map business models in the book. We said, in order to figure out what metric to track, you need to know what stage you're at, and you need to know what business you're in, because it actually matters. A freemium SaaS, e-commerce business. And so we mapped out 6 business models, and we mapped them as systems diagrams. And of course, they're oversimplifications of how businesses actually work. We missed some business models. We didn't do hardware, for example. We didn't do open source. And then lots of business models have gotten more complicated. We did mobile, which was really mobile gaming, because at the time we had made an investment in a mobile gaming company. So we used that, but of course, mobile e-commerce, mobile user-generated content, these things are all, but one of the exercises that we talk about in the book is to work with everybody at the company, but I think especially product people, to map your business. Do you understand the customer journey, every touch point that the customer has with the whole thing? Can you map out all the steps in the user states? And if you could do that, even the parts of the business that you haven't built yet, based on whatever stage that you're at, then I think you can have more of that strategic understanding without spending a lot of time in it, because your job as a product person is to, let's say, build stuff and see if it moves the needle on something very specific. But that mapping of your business, I think, is a worthwhile exercise for product people to go through.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you have to understand the map, the holistic view of the company. So you have to know, like you're saying, you have to know all those parts and how they all tie back. So when you do zoom in and zoom out from a strategic level to an execution level, it all goes back and forth like an elevator, and then crosses all these different domains. It's very easy to lose sight of that if you aren't, planning all that out as a product team and as an organization in general.
Yeah, I would say that often the work that product folks are doing, and then I would include product teams, design, engineering, maybe QA as well. Often you're working on things and you can't quite tell what you're doing, but you don't quite know why you're doing it or what needle you're really moving for the business. You're trying to lower churn, or you're trying to increase conversion, or you're trying to help acquire more. You're trying to move people to become more active users of your software product, but you're not quite sure if what you're doing will do that, and even if it does that, will it have an effect on a higher order metric? And that's a problem, because when product people are producing stuff, or product teams are producing stuff, like outputs, but we're not quite clear on the outcomes, i.e. we don't know if it makes a difference, that's very demoralizing. And usually that's sending us in the wrong direction. Either we're working on things that don't matter, or we're working on things that matter, but we can't tell why. And then we don't know why things worked or didn't work, and it kind of just unravels from there.
So another lesson there is that even if you collect all the data and analyze it, don't and create those KPIs, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with everyone. So
agreed. Yeah, share it with everyone. And also, I think, again, with this ability to collect more data, I think you're seeing more product people that are relying more on the data than anything else. And this is a balancing act, and I think it just comes with experience. The more things you've done, the more circumstances or situations you've seen, so that benefits people who have been in product for a while versus newer product folks. But you do have to use your instincts sometimes,
right?
And so if we think about if I go back, again, if we bring in the lean part of lean analytics, it is about running rapid experiments, tracking the results, and learning from that. And so if you do that, and the hypothesis that you're starting with is not maybe data driven, that's not the end of the world if the experiment you run is fast. If the experiment you run is long and it was based off some gut instinct and you're wrong, then that's a problem. But I think that aspect of, I can't just rely on the data, because at that point I'm not really sure what the product person is doing. I think they're basically project managing at that point. And if that's your job, that's fine. Project management is a role, but it's not the same as product management, which is the creation of stuff. For people. So I think applying your gut and using instincts and applying the data, come up with the ideas and then use data to verify them is one way of thinking about it. But you do have to balance both. If you rely exclusively, anybody can look at the data and say, "Oh, okay, make the button blue." Fantastic. I mean, it's not
as simple as that.
It's not as simple as that. No.
Exactly. Usually, it's not as simple as that.
Not usually.
But I think it's good especially for people that are new to product management or in the first few years, to start with the simple stuff and see that there is much more beyond that, because sometimes it's hard to see the complex things before you start with the simple things.
Totally agree. I think, again, it's easy for me to say, oh, look at the strategic view. Oh, and look at the 2 foot. Of course, those are all easy things to say.
I remember when I started with A/B testing, and just to learn what A/B testing was all about was mind-boggling for me. And then to look at the data, was like, oh, wow. So now I can actually make decision based on that and stuff like that. And what does this statistics say here? And why does this one wins over that one?
But A/B testing is such a good example because lots of people now use it. It's reasonably well understood. And then, but to really get sort of statistical significance with it, you do need a reasonable amount of data.
Yes.
So, but you can use A/B testing early on a landing page just to gut test a couple of value prop things, like just to get some little bit of insight combined with your own instincts, combined with 5 user interviews that you did. You can still use A/B testing that way, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Then others will say, no, A/B testing is exclusively when you have huge volumes of data, and then it will definitively tell you the A1 over the B or vice versa. I don't know, but if you use it waiting for all the data and it never shows up, or you use it and make a poor decision based on too little data, that's a risk.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to recognize that these are just tools in a toolbox. Generally, when I'm thinking about running experiments, I'm almost always thinking about running multiple experiments to try to get to the same, not to get to the same answer, but to answer the same question. Okay, we have this question or hypothesis. I'm going to run 2 or 3 different things and then maybe triangulate around what I think the best answer is.
Yeah. And we've talked in the past, we have a series about A/B testing and experimentation tools. So our listeners that are interested in that, go check them out if you did not listen to them yet. You might have touched a bit about that, but my last question I have about the book is, if you would have to write it today or to have a new, a new version coming out, what would you change in it?
So I think we've thought about it many times, many times. And Alistair and I, every once in a while, send each other a message and say, "Should we write version 2?" I'm like, no. It's it's a
lot of work, or is just
it's a lot of work, and I think a lot of people have done a good job again of be it in newsletters or other forums, sharing, moving the overall conversation around analytics and how they apply to lean methodology. Right. I think the conversations move quite well. So I would keep the basic core structure of the book there. What business are you in? I think the stage that you're at, and we define 5 stages in the book, I think still 100% applies. So that, I think those components I would keep the same. I think anything to do with benchmarking would be more examples. And then you would probably need to build, if you really wanted to do it, you'd have to build a massive database of examples or benchmarks, or maybe what loops, insights or something. You would almost have to turn it into a living, breathing resource as opposed to just a book. I think the core principles hold true, but even the business model concepts are complicated because business models can be so varied. So I think the idea of mapping your business makes sense. Would I try to go map every business? Probably not. I'd probably just trim it down to just use some examples. The book is 440 some odd pages. I mean, it's a pretty good, table weight if you need to hold some papers down or something, right? But that's because you're trying to stuff so much into it. So I would probably go back to the basic, what makes a good metric, what to focus on, how to run experiments, a little bit of lean and product methodology. What stage are you at? Just back to the core principles, leave more of the examples, although case studies, very effective, but they just become outdated. So you'd have to redo all the case studies.
Oh, that's right.
Something I like about it is, I know it's focused on startups methodology, but these kind of principles are really useful for mid-market and larger companies. So that
absolutely.
I like that point of just, anybody can use this stuff. So whether you're a small company or a large company, these kinds of principles are
Oh,
important.
absolutely. I mean, we actually, when we first published the book, most of the people that want to talk to us were big companies.
Mm-hmm.
Because big companies are running small companies often, or building new products or struggling with the exact same things that startups are from, are we focused on the right thing? Do we have enough retention? Do we have enough usage? Are we converting enough? Are we monetizing? All the same questions, maybe sometimes at a slightly bigger scale. But the same principles apply to a big company and how you would build product there as they do to a small company. So you're right, like it's called lean analytics and it started as a startup, but I think the principles are applicable and
universal. Yeah.
I think so.
This is actually a question for Matt, because I know, Matt, you're always excited about analytics. And how do you see this importance of analytics for product managers?
I think being data driven when it comes to building products is critical. But I also think that leveraging the qualitative and the feedback side of things. So the balancing, kind of going back to what Ben talked about, balancing that qualitative and quantitative perspective. You can capture the data, that's great, but actually talking to customers and getting that feedback is critical. My background was in analytics, and I saw the value of like, hey, you need to build analytics with a product mindset, and you need to build product with an analytical mindset. And so these two things are like tied together, and that's why it was so fascinating, because I was already building product in analytics, from the get-go. They weren't tied together. They haven't been that way. People working in data don't think about productization of data. Yeah, they're building products and they're building data products, but not really building these principles in there.
Yeah. And that's why I also was really curious, how, Ben, you started, how did you get to write this specific book about analytics from your background? Because thinking about my background and myself, although data was always important for me, I didn't have that, direct connection that how important data and analytics is. And it only came over time when I was requested to do things, or I saw a new product that helped me collect data in a certain way, or things like that. So it's really interesting for me to see your growth, Matt, in that, and how you connect the two very naturally, which is great, which is really cool. No, that's good.
And what I would say is that the trap, I think, Matt, you've described it quite well, which is the trap of being able to collect data is you spend all your time looking at dashboards of data, trying to make decisions. And so that is for sure a mistake. For me, if the ideal scenario is that entire product teams are engaging with users.
Right.
So if you can marry the qualitative and the quantitative, in the book we say the quantitative tells us what happened, the qualitative tells us why. So I can stare at the data and I can look at a conversion number I can look at a funnel and say, well, now I know where people fell off in the funnel, and I can muck around with that step in the funnel. I can take it out, I can move it, I can change the colors of the buttons, I can change the instructions. I still have no idea why that happened. And you can get better and better insights, heat map plus the conversion metrics, and you can try, or you could just pick up the phone, call a bunch of people, run some user tests. I have never ever run a user test with a user in the room and not learn something. Something that you thought was obvious, and they're like, I don't know where the thing is to do the thing. You're like,
that's right.
What happened? So the data doesn't give you the right to stop engaging with actual humans.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah. It's interesting because when you actually interview people, the actions they took, they don't realize they took. So when you go through a process with someone, they do these processes and you're collecting the data from them, like whether it be a heat map or whether it be whatever they experience in the product, and then you actually speak to them, they may have been doing something completely different or had different intentions when they were doing it.
Yeah, I think usability studies, it's not the end all be all, but to me, they always make me laugh, because you're like, all right, we built it, it's amazing. and you put it in people's hands, and they ignore everything you've done. They scroll wherever the heck they want to scroll.
Right.
They click whatever they want to click, and it always makes me laugh because you think, oh, we cracked it here. This user experience is incredible, and you're like, all right, so go post, update your profile. I don't even, and then they're just mucking around. And you're like, oh, forget it. Like this.
That's right. That's right.
Can you take these 5 actions to complete this task? And you do it through. Sometimes you do it through recordings. User interviews, that kind of stuff. Recording tools, and then you watch the recordings, and that can be pretty interesting. I think if you can do it in person, harder to set up, but it always blows me away. I'm just like, oh my, and you can't blame the user. The user's the user.
Exactly,
They're just trying to do something, that you ask them to do. And so I find that always really incredible.
So just to emphasize on this last point, in the book, you do talk about both qualitative and quantitative.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Lean analytics. Perfect.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're always trying to balance those two. I think we probably say in the book multiple times, never stop talking to users or customers, right? Because you can get there, right? So you can say, oh, we've launched, we have customers. That's now customer successes or the support's problem. They're getting all these problems. Then they're going to come to me with a list of things that they want done. I'm going to, users, their ridiculous requirements and their, silly issues. I'll probably deprioritize that stuff for things that I think are more important. And so it's like, no, you really have to talk to the users. And that's what I mean by having product teams. I think it's a big mistake that most companies don't have developers talk to users. I think it's a real miss, because when they see it and they see the pain, there's a very good chance they come up with a more elegant, faster solution than what you, the product person, are
absolutely
in your own head. So I again, that's not easy to do. So I can appreciate that. We can't have 5 people from a product team on every interview, so there's a limit to what we can do there. But I think it's a big miss when you've got a user research team and they're kind of at the forefront doing all of that work, and then they're sending the report over to the product people. That's cool. You could have user research and product doing it, sending the work to engineers or developers. It's how it's often done, but it's not great. Throw design in. Sometimes designers are doing that work, right? They're doing the user interviews and bringing it back. I don't understand. Like, we can all talk to humans, so I don't understand why everybody isn't involved in that process. And I can almost guarantee, if you do that, the products will be better that you ship.
Yeah. And I feel really, really lucky that my career as an engineer, before I was a product manager, all the companies I worked for, I had these opportunities to sit with the clients and develop, things for them. But this is where I fell into the other side of the trap of not just looking at the data, but not looking at data at all, just looking at what client says, and then really developing specifically for the clients, which is the other trap that you want to
it's all traps. The whole thing is a trap. So everything is a giant trap. But you're right. I mean, if all you do is talk to users, they tend not to be very good at actually creating solutions. They're good at expressing their problems. Most people, I find, like talking about their problems, and so you can tease that out of them. But when they say, if you build this for me or you built that for me, this is what I'm like, oh, that's a trap.
And then you get the point solution that nobody else will purchase. It's like one person's problem, and you can't scale it.
Yeah, or often in B2B, you'll get this, sales will get out there, they'll be selling, and then they'll get back the feedback. If you just built this one thing, the client will buy it from me.
Yes.
I'm the salesperson and I'm trying to hit my quota. So Matt, for the love of God, build this feature for me. Yes. You build the feature, and then the prospect's like, yeah, no, budget cycles. They're just bullshit,
or that's not really what I wanted, or I wanted it, but all the other user didn't want it.
Yeah, and it's just a nice way of saying you're not really solving my pain point. You don't really understand me as a person, as a user, as a potential customer. So I've rarely seen if we just add this one more thing, we can sell it. I've seen it work very rarely. So again, that's that trap of just talking to users exclusively. To me, finding the balance between the qualitative and the quantitative, and there's no easy way of saying, oh, here's exactly where that balance is. But if you can find it and involve everybody in the process, you're increasing the odds of building things that people actually want and will use.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool. There's like a level of art to it. Just trying to balance that. Trying to
experience.
To
yeah, you have to get the experience with that.
Mm-hmm.
There is. This is not a mechanical. That's why I said earlier, when you think about companies as both mechanical and biological systems, I think that kind of gets to it. If it was a perfectly mechanical system, you would know exactly where it's broken. You could fix that, replace that part. Easier to diagnose. Biological systems are more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So I think these things are more like amorphous blobs products, than they are robots.
Mm-hmm.
So the robots take over everything. So
that's coming.
See. 10, 20 years when AI will replace us as product managers, they might be able to do it better. I don't know.
That's right.
I'm not really a product manager anymore that much, so I'm okay with AI.
So you're okay, exactly.
Bring on the AI overlords. I think we're getting pretty close. Yeah.
But you can say this. You can say this on this podcast where all the listeners are product managers.
Here's the thing. So here's the thing. I think AI could do for product that would be amazing. I'm pretty sure we wrote something like this in the book, which was the point of data is to be able to ask it good questions. That's really theoretical sounding, right? Because what that really means is know what you're looking for, write a query, generate a report, right? So it's not just like one day having an inspiration and just randomly asking this, database of data or however you want to think about it, random questions to get interesting answers. AI should be able to do that for us quite nicely. So even if your questions aren't that good, you ask enough questions and bounce enough ideas around with the AI, I bet you get better answers. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't know that AI is going to, this is a whole other conversation about actually replacing product people, because but being able to leverage it to query data in natural language. I'm trying to understand why this and this and this are happening. Well, analyze it all, and I think it's this. Okay, so maybe that as a co-pilot, that would be pretty cool.
Absolutely, and we talked about it also in the past, that going beyond just the analytics and the dashboards, but into insights and what you can learn from those insights. How do you move forward? That could be also a place maybe that AI can help as well.
I think so. Because again, I think even knowing what to ask is not always evident, right? So you can look at the reports, you can look at the dashboards, you can look at the data. What is it telling me? How do all the pieces fit together? And you can only, everybody does this, and product people too. We're just using patterns that we're familiar with before, applying them to the situation we have now, and then trying to solve it. Whereas AI has many more patterns available to it to try to figure things out and solve problems. So I think that's where it becomes really interesting. Even ideating, maybe. Yep. Right. So Moshe, to your point around insights, it's insights like, well, this looks like it's off a little bit. Maybe try this, maybe try that. I don't want it to give me an answer, because I don't know that it will really know. And I want to apply my own sort of lens on it, of course. But oftentimes I've been in a situation where I don't know what to do. I see it's broken, but I'm not quite sure why. And so I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
So if somebody else could, jam with me on that, and I think someone else being AI it's gonna know more and see more faster than I am.
Or because there is no other people in the world and we left alone just
I'll tell you guys right now, I'm not going to be the last one. I'm not making it. I don't have a bunker. I'm not too addicted to my phone. I'm sorry. You guys might be the last two, but I won't be there.
And in this optimistic note,
there you go.
There you go. Yeah, I think we had lots of fun in this discussion.
This
So I
is
think
fun.
this is going to end up being one of the longer episodes, but I think people will have lots of value from that. Is there any other questions, Matt, you wanted to ask?
No, this nailed all the ones I had. We could go
Perfect.
on and on. I could talk about this
Yeah.
for days, but I think this was extremely helpful. So, and I think it's going to be really helpful, like I said, for product managers, whether you're new in product or whether you've been in product for a long time. I still think all this stuff is extremely valuable to people. So, thanks for
Absolutely.
coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, guys. Great conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And where can people reach out to you?
Yeah, so I did just launch a new newsletter. So it's at focusedchaos.co. It's been a while since I've been writing actively, and I really enjoy writing. And so if people want to subscribe to the newsletter, it's free. Please do. Of course, I am on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. There are no other Ben Yoskovitzes on the planet. So if you can spell my last name or even get remotely close, you will find me. Always love talking to product people and founders about this and other things as well. So reach out to me, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then Focused Chaos, is the newsletter that I'm doing all my writing on right now.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Ben. This was really great discussion, and encourage every product manager to read Lean Analytics and to learn about it and continue the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Moshe. Thanks, all the listeners. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate the feedback and support. Please leave us a review to help others find the show on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to the show.